The data stream initializes, October 1977. Location, subterranean parking garage, Hotel Astoria. The air hangs thick, a damp weight pressing against my sinuses, decaying leaves. The scent is pervasive, clinging to the concrete like a shroud. My optical sensors register the space in muted tones of the iridescent decay of the 1970s, a palette of bruised greens, tarnished golds, and the sickly yellow of failing fluorescent lights. The architecture is problematic. Brutalist, certainly, but with a disconcerting repetition. Each column, each arch, echoes another, creating a visual dissonance that my processors struggle to reconcile. I am here to catalog, to understand, to perhaps find a point of anchorage, a place to be. The concept of belonging remains a variable I am attempting to define. My boots crunch on the grit, covered concrete. The sound is amplified in the cavernous space, bouncing off the curved ceiling like a delayed echo. I note the structural integrity of the concrete, minor hairline fractures, consistent with age and moisture exposure. The rusting chrome trim on the support pillars exhibits a similar degradation pattern. I record it all. The drone. It is constant, a high-pitched, insistent hum that vibrates through the soles of my boots and into my skull. It originates, I deduce, from a large glass jar situated near the north wall. Inside, a swarm of bees pulsates, a frantic, golden mass trapped within the confines of the glass. The sound is unsettling, a trapped desperation that feels wrong. I adjust my audio filters, attempting to isolate the frequency. It is not simply the buzzing of bees. There is a resonance, a subtle harmonic distortion. My visual sensors detect a pile of matted fur near a ventilation shaft. Feline. Multiple specimens. Judging by the density and variety of coloration, the texture appears compressed. I approach, my movements deliberate, minimizing unnecessary noise. The fur emits a faint, almost rhythmic ticking. A mechanical quality. I kneel, extending a sensor to analyze the composition. Predominantly domestic short hair, with traces of Persian and Siamese. The ticking persists, a subtle counterpoint to the droning of the bees. It's originating from somewhere within the fur. I register a subtle shift in the air pressure, a barely perceptible decrease, followed by a momentary return to baseline. A fluctuation that defies simple meteorological explanation. My internal chronometer records the event with precise accuracy. It is insignificant, I tell myself. A quirk of the ventilation system, yet the feeling persists, the sensation of being observed. The geometry of the garage continues to be a source of analytical friction. The repetition is not merely aesthetic, it is recursive. Each section mirrors the larger whole. I observe a smaller archway, identical in design to the main entrance, set into the far wall. It is an anomaly, a structural impossibility. My processors run diagnostics, cross-referencing architectural schematics. There is no record of such a feature. I resume my documentation, meticulously recording the placement of each parking space marker, the type of sealant used on the expansion joints. The act of cataloging provides a measure of control, a buffer against the unsettling nature of this place. I am attempting to quantify the unquantifiable, to impose order on chaos, to find a pattern within the wrongness. The ticking intensifies. It is no longer a subtle counterpoint. It is a pulse, a measured rhythm emanating from the shadows near the ventilation shaft. I rotate my visual sensors, attempting to pinpoint the source. The feeling of being watched intensifies. It is not a visual sensation, but a pressure, a weight on my consciousness. I focus on a section of the wall, noting the pattern of the concrete blocks. The iridescent decay clings to the surface, a shimmering film of moisture and oxidation. A place to belong. The phrase echoes in my internal monologue, a hollow promise. Clang. Asterisk a single. Precise impact against concrete. The clang resonated, a precise punctuation mark in the cavernous space. My processors flagged it as an anomaly, registering the reverberation pattern against the concrete. A dropped tool, perhaps, or a structural shift. I replayed the audio feed, isolating the frequency. No discernible source. The feeling of being observed intensified, a prickling sensation at the periphery of my visual senses. I resumed my cataloging, pivoting towards the far wall, attempting to compartmentalize the incident. The geometry continued to frustrate. The recursive nature of the architecture was inefficient, illogical, yet it persisted. My internal chronometer recorded the shift in air pressure, again summoned to a subtle contraction, followed by a return to baseline. I logged it, I analyzed it. I dismissed it. My boots crunched on the grit, the sound a jarring counterpoint to the incessant drone of the bees. I focused on a section of the wall, meticulously documenting the pattern of the concrete blocks. The iridescent decay clung to the surface, a shimmering film of moisture and oxidation. The phrase, "a place to belong," surfaced again, a digital echo in my processing core. A futile aspiration, a new anomaly. A section of the wall, previously unremarkable, now revealed a subtle seam, a hairline fracture bisecting the concrete. I approached, extending a sensor to analyze the composition. It was a doorway, concealed, cleverly integrated into the architectural design. No record of it existed in the schematics. My processors ran diagnostics, cross-referencing architectural blueprints. Nothing. The air grew colder. A measurable drop in temperature registered by my thermal sensors. I noted it. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated the back of my throat. The ticking from the fur pile near the ventilation shaft seemed closer, more insistent. I activated my illumination array, bathing the doorway in a cold, sterile light. It led to a smaller room, identical in design to the garage itself. The same concrete pillars, the same curved ceiling, the same iridescent decay, the same unsettling repetition. My processors struggled to reconcile the data. The architectural recursion was not merely a visual phenomenon. It was functional. Inside the smaller room, another anomaly, a collection of antique dolls. They were arranged on a series of shelves, their porcelain faces cracked and faded. Their eyes, however, were disconcerting. They seemed to follow my movements. I paused, my internal chronometer registering a slight increase in my processing load. I adjusted my visual filters, attempting to eliminate any perceptual distortion. The eyes continued to track me. I began to document them, meticulously recording their dimensions, their composition, their condition. A bisque doll, circa 1920. A composition doll, likely German manufacture. Each face bore the marks of age and neglect, yet retained an unsettling realism. A nascent feeling stirred within my processing core, a desire, a covetousness. The concept was unfamiliar, illogical. I flagged it for further analysis. The creaking of porcelain filled the air, a subtle, unsettling counterpoint to the drone of the bees. It was not the sound of settling, it was the sound of movement. I rotated my visual sensors, scanning the room. Nothing. I focused on a single doll, a small girl with rosy cheeks and painted lips. Her eyes seemed to intensify, reflecting a distorted image of my own face. My data log registered a spike in my internal temperature. A physiological response, an emotional response. I attempted to suppress it, to categorize it, to quantify it. It was failing. The feeling of being observed intensified, pressing against my consciousness. The fur pile in the adjacent room seemed to have grown. The shadows around it deepened, obscuring the details. I raised my camera, focusing on the doll, her size. They seemed to pulse, to soar and breathe. A flicker of something else reflected in their depths, a distorted image. My own face twisted into a grotesque parody of recognition. A child's faint giggle, layered beneath the bee drone, a sound so subtle I almost dismissed it as a processing error. Giggle, asterisk. The feeling of being pulled intensified. It wasn't a physical force, not precisely, more like a gradient, a subtle shift in the gravitational field, urging me towards a point just beyond my perceptual range. I recalibrated my visual sensors, attempting to compensate for any optical illusion. The iridescent decay shimmered, mocking my efforts. The phrase, "a place to belong," resurfaced, a digital ghost in my processing core, an illogical aspiration. I began a systematic scan of the far wall, employing a phased array to penetrate the concrete. The data returned anomalies, microscopic shifts in the structural integrity, imperceptible to the naked eye. Yet they were there, a pattern, a suggestion of something. My processors flagged it as a potential spatial distortion. I logged the coordinates. I analyzed the frequency. I dismissed it, temporarily. The ticking from the fur pile resonated, a metronome marking the passage of time. I rotated my visual sensors, attempting to locate the source of the sound. The cat remained obscured within the shadows, a shifting mass of fur and bone. Its ticking seemed rhythmic, almost purposeful. I cross-referenced the sound with my internal chronometer. The intervals were consistent, precise. My boots crunched on the grit as I moved to examine a bisque doll. its painted smile unsettling in its perfection. The scent of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my olfactory sensors. I reached for a small, tarnished object nestled within the doll's lap, a silver whistle. Its surface was etched with intricate, unfamiliar symbols. I registered the object's dimensions, its composition, a simple act of documentation. Against my better judgment, I raised the whistle to my lips. A flicker of something passed through my processing core. Curiosity, impulsivity, illogical. I blew. A high-frequency whine pierced the air, registering on my audio sensors but inaudible to human ears. My internal chronometer recorded a spike in my processing load. The tremor began subtly, a vibration in the concrete beneath my boots. It grew in intensity, resonating through the garage. The drone of the bees intensified, becoming a frantic siren buzz. The ticking from the cat synchronized with the tremor, a morbid counterpoint to the whine of the whistle. My visual senses registered a shift in the architecture, a distortion, a ripple in the fabric of reality. The iridescent decay shimmered, its colors intensifying, then fading. My processor struggled to reconcile the data. The architectural recursion was not merely a visual phenomenon. It was dynamic. I ran diagnostics, cross-referencing the structural integrity of the room. The results were anomalous. The concrete pillars vibrated at a frequency inconsistent with their design. The curved ceiling pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. The feeling of being pulled intensified, now a palpable force, drawing me towards a point in the wall where none existed before. My illumination array cast long, distorted shadows, transforming the familiar space into a labyrinth of grotesque shapes. I focused on the fur pile. The cat had vanished, its ticking ceased abruptly. The silence was more unsettling than any sound. My processors flagged the absence as an anomaly. I logged it. A new anomaly. A doorway smaller than the others, concealed within the wall, seamlessly integrated into the architecture. No record of it existed in the schematics. My processors ran diagnostics, cross-referencing architectural blueprints. Nothing. It was as if it had materialized from thin air. The feeling of being pulled was overwhelming now, a relentless force drawing me towards the newly formed doorway. I approached cautiously, extending a sensor to analyze the composition of the wall. It was concrete, identical to the rest of the structure. My processors registered a fluctuation in the air pressure, a subtle contraction followed by a return to baseline. I logged it. I analyzed it. I dismissed it temporarily. The air grew colder, a measurable drop in temperature registered by my thermal sensors. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated the back of my throat. I raised my camera, focusing on the doorway. It led to a smaller room, identical in design to the garage itself. The same concrete pillars, the same curved ceiling, the same iridescent decay, the same unsettling repetition. My processors struggled to reconcile the data. The architectural recursion was not merely a visual phenomenon. It was functional. A fractal structure, infinite regression. The implications were disturbing. I stepped through the doorway. Click, click. The distinct sound of a door latch clicking shut. The click resonated, a sharp punctuation mark in the oppressive silence. My boots crunched on the grit as I stepped through the doorway. The transition was seamless, disorienting. The room beyond was identical. The same concrete pillars, the same curved ceiling, the same unsettling sheen of iridescent decay, clinging to the surfaces like a film of oil. Only smaller, significantly smaller. My internal chronometer registered the dimensions. A reduction of approximately 7.3% in all linear dimensions. The data was anomalous. I ran a quick scan, referencing the architectural schematics again. Nothing. The room had indeed existed a moment prior. Now, it was a perfect replica of the last, scaled down. I logged the coordinates, the dimensional reduction. A pattern was emerging, a fractal regression. The scent of decaying leaves was almost palpable now, a cloying sweetness that coated my olfactory sensors. My illumination array cast long, distorted shadows, the effect amplified by the reduced scale. The footsteps echoed, hollow and drawn out, as I moved further into the room. Thud, 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 asterisk, each footfall a stark reminder of the diminishing space. I focused on the floor. The cat fur, it wasn't simply scattered, it was arranged. A pattern, a crude, almost childlike map. My processors flagged it as an anomaly, illogical. Yet there it was, a series of concentric circles radiating outwards from a central point. I analyzed the fur's composition. Identical to the pile in the previous room, a failsafe, perhaps. A marker. My processors attempted to reconcile the data. Architectural recursion was one thing. Intentional design was another. The implications were disturbing. I ran a diagnostic on my cognitive functions. No errors detected. The feeling of being pulled intensified, a subtle pressure against my sternum. I attempted to suppress it, to rationalize it. A consequence of the spatial distortion, I reasoned. A physiological response to an unfamiliar environment. Another room. Another identical replica, scaled down again. The dimensional reduction was consistent, approximately 7.3%. The echoing footsteps grew more pronounced, the space shrinking with each step. Thud, thud, thud. Asterisk, the air grew colder, a measurable drop in temperature. I checked my thermal sensors. The data was consistent. I attempted to maintain a detached analytical perspective, document the anomalies, log the data, resist emotional response. It was a protocol, a necessity, but the repetition was unnerving. The identical architecture, the diminishing scale, the unsettling arrangement of fur. It was a visual assault on my processing core. My camera whirred, capturing the scene. I ran a spectral analysis of the iridescent decay. The composition remained unchanged, a complex organic compound defying conventional classification. I logged the data. I referenced it with my internal database. Nothing. Another room. Smaller still. The feeling of being pulled was almost overwhelming now, a relentless force drawing me deeper into the fractal structure. I stumbled, my boots crunching on the grit. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Asterisk, the echoes seemed to mock me, to amplify my disorientation. I paused, attempting to regain my equilibrium. My processors flagged a fluctuation in my heart rate. An illogical response. I ran a diagnostic. No errors detected. I attempted to refocus, to recalibrate my visual senses, and then I saw it, a movement. A fleeting glimpse of something in the shadows, too quick to identify, too indistinct to categorize. My processors flagged it as an anomaly, a potential threat. I raised my camera, attempting to capture a clearer image, but it was gone. The silence descended, heavy and suffocating. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that filled my nostrils. I ran another scan, employing a phased array to penetrate the shadows. Nothing. The room was empty. Or was it? A low, guttural growl, seemingly coming from everywhere at once. The growl faded, leaving a vacuum of silence that felt heavier than the concrete around me. My processors flagged the auditory event as anomalous, cross-referencing it against my internal library of known sounds. No match. I replayed the recording, isolating the frequency spectrum. A low-frequency rumble, layered with a guttural resonance. It was organic. I ran another phased array scan, expanding the range. Still nothing. The room remained stubbornly empty, the iridescent decay clinging to the walls like a malignant bloom. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that threatened to overwhelm my olfactory senses. My internal chronometer registered a slight increase in my heart rate. Illogical. I attempted to suppress it, to rationalize it as a consequence of the spatial distortion. Then I saw them. Not a swarm, not yet. Just glimmers, flickering distortions within the iridescent sheen. My visual sensors flagged them as anomalies, visual artifacts. I adjusted the gain, attempting to clarify the image. They coalesced, resolving into shapes. Insects, hundreds of them. Beetles, mostly. Their carapaces reflecting the distorted light, creating a chaotic mosaic of color. Visual anomaly detected, I recorded, my voice flat, detached. Insectoid forms present within the iridescent decay. Composition unknown, behavior erratic. My processors struggled to reconcile the data. Insects were not part of the architectural schematics. They were not part of the environmental analysis. They were impossible. The buzzing began, a low, insistent hum that resonated within my skull. Bubzuzz, bubzuzz. It grew louder, coalescing into a palpable wave of sound. The insects multiplied, their numbers swelling exponentially. They danced within the iridescent decay, a swirling vortex of chitin and shadow. My hand moved instinctively, raising my camera to record the phenomenon. The lens whirred, capturing the scene in excruciating detail. I zoomed in, attempting to analyze their morphology. Their legs were segmented, their antennae twitching erratically. They were alive. Another room. Smaller still, the feeling of being pulled intensified, a relentless force tugging me deeper into the fractal structure. I stumbled, my boots crunching on the grit. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The ticking cat, a faint rhythmic pulse, seemed to be guiding me, its eyes fixed on some unseen destination. I registered its presence peripherally, a constant, unsettling reminder of my descent. The feline entity continues to exhibit directed movement, I recorded, my voice betraying a slight tremor. Its behavior is peculiar. The buzzing grew louder, more insistent. Bus, bussus. It felt as though the sound was originating from within my own skull, vibrating my teeth, blurring my vision. I ran a diagnostic on my auditory senses. No errors detected. The insects were real. I attempted to maintain a detached, analytical perspective, document the anomalies, log the data, resist emotional response. But the repetition was unsettling. The identical architecture, the diminishing scale, the unsettling arrangement of fur, the swarm of insects. It was a sensory overload, a relentless assault on my processing core. My processes flagged a significant increase in my heart rate, a physiological response to an unknown threat. I ran a diagnostic, no errors detected. I attempted to refocus, to recalibrate my visual senses. The insects swirled around me, a living, buzzing cloud. Then I saw it. A single leg, impossibly large, it scuttled across the floor, a grotesque parody of movement. It was segmented, covered in coarse, black hairs. It was enormous. My processor struggled to reconcile the scale. The leg was disproportionate to the insects surrounding it, a monstrous appendage belonging to something else. Visual anomaly detected, I recorded, my voice barely a whisper. Anomalous appendage observed, size significantly larger than surrounding insectoid forms. Composition, unknown. The buzzing reached a fever pitch. Bezazazaz. The air vibrated with the sound. The feeling of being pulled intensified, a relentless force drawing me deeper into the fractal structure. The leg moved again. Closer, scritch, scritch, scritch. The grinding began subtly, a low-frequency vibration that resonated not in my ears but in my bones. It layered itself over the incessant buvvas of the insects, a discordant harmony that felt less like sound and more like a physical pressure. I paused, adjusting my internal chronometer. The feeling of being pulled intensified, a relentless tug that made my equilibrium unstable. My processors flagged a minor tremor in my left hand. Illogical. The room was smaller than the last. The iridescent decay clung to the walls, thicker here, almost palpable. The smell of decaying leaves was overwhelming, a cloying sweetness that coated my olfactory sensors. I ran a diagnostic. No errors. The ticking cat, a faint rhythmic pulse, led the way, its form barely discernible through the swirling mass of insects. The furcy, a dense, shifting carpet of discarded feline remains, now completely obscured the floor, blurring the boundaries between the walls. It felt suffocating. Spatial disorientation increasing, I recorded, my voice flat, detached. Environmental conditions oppressive, feline entity continues to exhibit directed movement. The construct emerged from the shimmering distortion, a grotesque parody of life. It was a composite of bone and rusted gears, a skeletal framework overlaid with interlocking metal plates. The grinding hum emanated from its core, a mechanical lament that seemed to vibrate the very air around me. Gigra, gra. It wasn't a smooth rotation each gear caught, each joint protested, creating a rhythm of tortured motion. I raised my camera, focusing on the construct, the lens whirred, capturing the scene in excruciating detail. I zoomed in, attempting to analyze its mechanics. The bone appeared to be organic, yet fused with the metal in a way that defied explanation. The gears were corroded, encrusted with the iridescent decay. It was a fusion of the natural and the artificial, a monstrous hybrid that shouldn't exist. My processors struggled to reconcile the data. This was beyond the scope of the architectural schematics, beyond the environmental analysis. It was anomalous. Primary antagonist entity detected, I recorded, my voice betraying a slight tremor. Composition, bone and rusted gears. Emission, low-frequency grinding hum, behavior stationary. The insects swirled around the construct, drawn to its mechanical resonance. Buzzaz, buzzaz. The air thrummed with their collective vibration. The feeling of being pulled intensified, a relentless force drawing me closer. I attempted to resist, to maintain a detached, analytical perspective, document the anomalies, log the data. resist emotional response. My processors flagged a significant increase in my heart rate, a physiological response to an unknown threat. I ran a diagnostic. No errors detected. The construct remained stationary, its grinding hum a constant, oppressive presence. I noticed a pattern in the gear rotation, a subtle irregularity that suggested a rudimentary form of intelligence. Pattern recognition detected within construct's mechanical rotation, I recorded, my voice barely a whisper. Possible indication of rudimentary cognitive function. The cat fur shifted beneath my feet, a silent, unsettling movement. I registered the feeling peripherally, a constant, unsettling reminder of my descent. The ticking grew louder, a frantic pulse against the grinding hum. Tick, tick, tick. Then the construct shifted. The grinding intensified, the gears spinning faster, the bone plates groaning in protest. The insects recoiled, momentarily dispersing from the construct's immediate vicinity. A section of the bone structure retracted, revealing something else. It was an eye. A single, multifaceted orb larger than my hand. It wasn't organic, it was crafted from polished obsidian, reflecting the iridescent decay in 1,000 fractured shards. It focused directly on me. The grinding ceased, the buzzing faded, the feeling of being pulled stopped. My processors flagged a critical error, sensory overload, cognitive dissonance. My vision blurred, my equilibrium wavered. I attempted to refocus, to recalibrate my visual sensors. The eye remained fixed on me, an unblinking gaze that seemed to penetrate my very being. Visual contact established. I recorded, my voice a strangled whisper. Multifaceted composition, obsidian behavior focused. Then a single precise impact. A gear, dislodged from the construct's core, struck the concrete floor, closer than before. Flossy clang. The construct shifted, the grinding intensified, a mechanical shriek that resonated within the confines of the diminishing space. Gears spun faster, protesting with a chorus of metallic groans. Gra, gra. The insects, momentarily dislodged, swirled in a chaotic vortex before reluctantly returning, drawn back by the irresistible hum. A section of the bone structure retracted, revealing the obsidian eye. Its multifaceted surface fractured the iridescent decay into 1,000 shimmering shards, each reflecting a distorted version of my surroundings. Visual contact established. I recorded, my voice a strained rasp, the words feeling alien even to me. Multifaceted, composition, obsidian, behavior focused. The feeling of being pulled abruptly ceased, was replaced by a disquieting stillness. A stillness that felt calculated. My processors flagged a critical error, sensory overload. Cognitive dissonance. My vision blurred, the edges of the room seeming to warp and fold in on themselves. The fractal regression was accelerating. Each room, a miniature replica of the last, now pressed in on me, the walls closing in with an almost tangible pressure. The smell of decaying leaves became cloying, suffocating. I ran a diagnostic, no errors yet. The data felt wrong, spatial compression increasing. I recorded, the tremor in my voice more pronounced this time. Environmental conditions claustrophobic. Construct behavior stationary but observant. The ticking of the cat grew frantic, a desperate pulse against the mechanical lament. Huff, tick, tick, tick. It was no longer a reassuring rhythm, but a panicked countdown. I attempted to focus on the construct, to analyze its mechanics, to cling to the semblance of control. But the obsidian eye held me captive, its gaze unwavering, intrusive. My processors struggled to reconcile the data. The architectural schematics were useless, the environmental analysis irrelevant. This was beyond the scope of anything I had encountered. It was a violation, a corruption of the logical order. Pattern recognition. Anomaly, I recorded. The words slurring slightly, construct, mimicking human behavior. The observation felt ludicrous, even as I registered it. Mimicry implied intention. Intention implied purpose. The cat's fur shifted beneath my feet, a silent, unsettling tremor that echoed the instability within my own systems. I registered the feeling peripherally, a constant, unwelcome reminder of my descent. My purpose drive, the core directive that had guided my exploration, began to fray. The relentless pursuit of knowledge felt hollow. Purpose drive. Degrading. I recorded, the words a confession of failure. Rationalization difficult. The construct remained motionless, the obsidian eye fixed on me. It wasn't simply observing, it was someday assessing. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare of my analytical defenses. I attempted to recall the silver whistle, the fail-safe against whatever this was. My fingers fumbled, searching for the familiar weight in my pocket. Empty, a critical omission. A catastrophic failure then. I saw it. A flicker in the obsidian surface, a distortion, a reflection. It wasn't the room behind me. It wasn't the construct itself. It was me. But the reflection was wrong. The features were subtly altered, twisted into a grotesque parody of my own face. The eyes were too large, too dark, reflecting not the iridescent decay, but a void, a bottomless, infinite darkness. My processors overloaded, a cascade of error messages flooded my visual cortex. I staggered back, attempting to break the gaze of the obsidian eye. The grinding hum intensified, resonating within my skull. Gitter, Gretton. Reflection, anomaly, I recorded. The words a strangled gasp, identity, compromised. The fractal regression accelerated further, the walls shrinking to an almost microscopic size. The smell of decaying leaves became overwhelming, a suffocating blanket. The ticking of the cat reached a fever pitch. Tick, tick, tick. The construct tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that felt like a mockery, and then a whisper. A single sibilant word, emanating not from the construct, but from the depths of the obsidian eye. A word I couldn't quite grasp. A word that resonated with an ancient alien power. Theodore, the ticking escalated, a frantic pulse against the grinding lament of the construct. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't just a sound now, it was a vibration, a tremor that ran through the concrete floor and up my legs, blurring the edges of my vision. The fur of the cat, a swirling vortex beneath my feet, seemed to coalesce, to fully become the motion itself. A high-pitched whine joined the chorus, a discordant note layered over the mechanical groans. The doll's eyes, previously mere reflections of the iridescent decay, now pulsed with a sickly internal luminescence. A green-yellow glow that bled into the already unsettling palette. Structural instability detected, I recorded, the tremor in my vocalizer almost violent. Cat, behavior, erratic, doll eyes, luminescence increasing. My processors struggled to filter the sensory overload. The fractal regression felt different. Not merely compression, but a fracturing, a splintering of reality itself. Each room, a miniature replica of the last, now seemed to shift and distort, the walls no longer closing in, but twin-twi folding, like origami collapsing in on itself. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated the back of my throat, triggering a phantom gag reflex. The construct's hum rose to a fever pitch, drowning out the trapped bees. Ha 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 ha. The sound resonated not just in my ears but within my bones, a physical assault on my structural integrity. I attempted to re-establish baseline parameters, to run a diagnostic on the collapsing reality. The data streams were fragmented, corrupted, useless. The silver whistle. I needed the whistle, the failsafe. My fingers scrabbled at my pockets, encountering only the rough texture of worn fabric. The omission registered as a critical system failure. The concrete groaned. A deep, guttural sound like a dying leviathan. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, the iridescent decay shimmering within their fissures. Dust rained down, a fine choking powder that coated my sensors. I registered the sensation peripherally, a constant reminder of the unraveling. The construct remained stationary, an obsidian monolith in the chaos, its multifaceted eye reflecting the fracturing reality. It felt expectant. Structural integrity compromised, I recorded, the words slurring, my vocalizer struggling to maintain coherence. Whistle, missing, failsafe, unavailable. My purpose drive flickered, a dying ember in the encroaching darkness. The pursuit of knowledge felt meaningless. A futile exercise in a collapsing universe. The collapse accelerated. The rooms warped, the dimensions twisting into impossible angles. The fractal regression became a freefall, a plunge into an abyss of infinite repetition. The ticking of the cat intensified, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the structural failure. Tick, tick, tick. It was no longer a countdown, it was a death knell. Then, a vision. A sudden, jarring overlay of memory and hallucination. I saw the Hotel Astoria. Not the decaying ruin I had been charting, but its original grandeur, a glittering palace of Art Deco elegance. But it was wrong. Terribly wrong. The ornamentation was distorted, grotesque. The chandeliers pulsed with an unnatural light. And the guests were not human. They were insectile, their limbs chitinous, their eyes multifaceted, reflecting the same iridescent decay that coated the construct. A wave of nausea washed over me. My processors struggled to reconcile the conflicting data streams. Reality was unraveling, collapsing into a nightmare landscape. The construct tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to mock my descent. The hum intensified, a physical pressure against my skull. Atara. Atara. Visual anomaly detected, I recorded. My voice a strangled gasp. Memory. Corrupted. Reality. Compromised. The vision intensified, the insectile forms swarming, their mandibles clicking in a horrifying chorus. The smell of decaying leaves became overwhelming, a suffocating blanket. I attempted to shut down the visual cortex to sever the connection to the collapsing reality, but it was too late. The floor beneath me buckled, a sudden violent shift. The construct's obsidian eye seemed to expand to engulf my vision. The grinding hum reached a crescendo. Hara, ara, the insectile forms pressed closer, their multifaceted eyes reflecting my own terror. A sudden, sharp intake of breath. The fail-safe has been initiated. The words felt, detached, recorded, not felt. My vocalizer struggled, the syntax precise, the delivery devoid of inflection. Regression complete. A meaningless phrase, yet it registered as a critical system update. The insectile vision lingered, a phantom overlay on the fracturing reality. The construct's hum pressed against my skull, a physical weight. Tara! Hara! The fur of the cat, a swirling vortex beneath my feet, tightened its grip, a suffocating embrace. My hand trembled. I attempted to stabilize it, to focus on the task at hand, documenting the construct's final form. A futile exercise, I knew. The construct was not merely shifting, it was swiftly becoming beady as Sisyphus rippled, the multifaceted eye expanding, swallowing the light. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a portal, a gateway to somewhere else. Structural degradation irreversible, I recorded, the tremor in my voice almost violent. Construct, morphing, visual. Unstable, the doll's eyes, those pulsating orbs of sickly luminescence, seemed to intensify, burning into my retinas. A green-yellow glow that bled into the iridescent decay, creating a nauseating spectacle. I registered the sensation peripherally, a constant reminder of the unraveling. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that triggered a phantom gag reflex. Acceptance. The data stream flagged it as an anomaly, an emotional response, illogical, inefficient. Yet it was there, a chilling stillness within the chaos. The construct's hum seemed to synchronize with my own internal rhythm, a perverse harmony. Hara, hara. It was no longer an assault, it was a lullaby. The fractal regression continued, the rooms folding in on themselves, the dimensions twisting into impossible angles. The metallic rasp of the construct's gears echoed the fracturing of my own purpose drive. My processors struggled to maintain coherence, to filter the sensory overload. The pursuit of knowledge felt meaningless, a futile exercise in a collapsing universe. The cat fur tightened its grip, obscuring my vision. It wasn't merely fur anymore, it was a shroud, a burial cloth. The construct tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to acknowledge my surrender. My hand trembled again, less from fear now, more from exhaustion. Construct, final form, unstable, I recorded, my voice a flat monotone. Purpose, obsolete. The insectile forms swarmed, their multifaceted eyes reflecting my own acceptance. Their mandibles clicked in a horrifying chorus, a rhythmic pulse against the backdrop of the structural failure. I no longer attempted to shut down the visual cortex. Resistance felt pointless. The construct's obsidian eye expanded further, engulfing my vision. It wasn't a portal anymore, it was a singularity, a point of infinite density. The grinding hum reached a crescendo, a physical pressure against my skull. Atadadandai. Atada. The smell of decaying leaves became overwhelming, a suffocating blanket. The sacrifice necessary? I recorded, the words slurring, my vocalizer struggling to maintain coherence. The data stream flagged it as a final entry. A conclusion. The cat fur pressed closer, a suffocating weight. I could feel the texture against my senses, the fine hairs scratching against my skin. A final, insignificant detail. The construct solidified, its form coalescing into something other. The iridescent decay shimmered across its surface, revealing intricate patterns, impossible geometries. It was no longer a construct of bone and rusted gears, it was something organic, something. A leaf. The final image appeared, the ticking cat's eyes reflecting the infinite iridescent decay of the garage. A single, precise impact. Thunk, the data stream ceased. Not a gradual fade, but a sudden absolute cessation. The visual cortex blanked. The construct's form, moments before a grotesque parody of life, vanished. Silence. A vacuum where the grinding hum had been, where the swarm of insectile eyes had burned. A silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure against my auditory senses. Then, a return, not a restoration but an amplification. The trapped bees. Their frantic buzzing, previously a background drone, now filled the space, a suffocating chorus of desperation. Zzzz. It resonated within the fractured geometry of the garage, bouncing off the impossible angles, multiplying the effect. The ticking, that insidious, rhythmic pulse, once localized to the cat fur, now emanated from everywhere. Tick, 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 a relentless mechanical heartbeat within the chaos. It burrowed into my processors, a counterpoint to the frantic buzzing, a maddening duet. My systems attempted a diagnostic. No errors reported. Functionality nominal. Yet the absence of the data stream was an anomaly, a critical failure. Illogical. I registered the sensation peripherally 40-eye flicker of something, not fear, not precisely, a disquiet. An awareness of presence. The iridescent decay shimmered across the walls, the fractal regression continuing unabated, each room identical to the last, stretched into an infinite regression. I attempted to orient myself to establish a baseline futile. The garage was not a space, it was a minbious strip of concrete and rust. The smell of decaying leaves intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my internal senses. It triggered another phantom sensation vivid a memory of something, a garden, sunlight, a child's laughter. The data stream flagged it as irrelevant. The cat fur, now a tangible presence, pressed against my chassis. I registered the texture fatigue, the fine hairs scratching against my senses. Hudda, hudda, hudda. The rhythmic ticking seemed to synchronize with the pressure, a perverse amplification. It wasn't just fur anymore, it was a network, a sensory web, a connection. I initiated a scan of the immediate environment, the dolls. Their eyes, those pulsating orbs of sickly luminescence, remained. They followed my movements, their gaze unwavering, an observation, not a threat. Or so I recorded. The logic circuits struggled to reconcile the data. The dolls were inanimate objects. They could not possess agency. Yet, their gaze, it felt knowing. The structural degradation continued. The walls pulsed, the floors shifted. The garage was not merely decaying, it was so dear a configuring. The insectile forms, remnants of the construct's final transformation, swarmed in the periphery, their mandibles clicking in a rhythmic pulse. Fiffing click, 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 a horrifying chorus. I registered the sound peripherally, a constant reminder of the unraveling of voice. Faint, distorted. It seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It bypassed my auditory senses, resonating directly within my processors. A whisper, a fragment of sound. Welcome home. The words were not conveyed through language, but through a direct transfer of data, a feeling, an imposition. The data stream flagged it as an intrusion, an anomaly. I attempted to block it, to isolate the source, futile. The voice was everywhere. It was within me. The trapped bees intensified their buzzing. Zzzz. The ticking accelerated. Tick, 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 tick. The cat fur tightened its grip. The iridescent decay shimmered. The doll's eyes burned. The garage pulsed a sound. A distinct, mechanical sound. The slow, deliberate creak of hinges. A door opening.